Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again, and today I'm going to be talking about top 5 coffee fragrances, so stay tuned for that. If you like fragrance reviews, cologne comparisons, top lists, and first impressions, hit that subscribe button for more great content. So coffee is a note that I actually really enjoy in fragrances. I guess, oddly enough, I don't really like coffee, but I do really enjoy the smell of it. I find a lot of fragrances, they have a coffee note. It's not particularly dominant, or you don't smell it that much, or it's very short-lived. A really good example of, a good coffee fragrance that, is the coffee is fairly short-lived is something like Pure Coffee, where to me I smell like coffee for maybe an hour, 2 hours, and then it becomes, the amen dry down. So I do enjoy fragrances like that, but I wanted to make a list of fragrances where the coffee is definitely a little bit more pronounced, and something that is usually anyways a little bit more long lasting. And I'm going to get right into the list. So first one on the list is Intoxicated by Kilian. This is a fragrance I actually really enjoy. Now it is very similar to Amen, the original Amen. There's a lot of similarities between those two. Now there's some differences, but if you have a well-performing batch of Amen, you probably are fine. So the biggest difference a lot of people talk about is, Intoxicated's a little bit smoother. It doesn't have that tarry vibe that Amen does have. And I should mention, at least newer Amen do not seem to perform that well. The older ones certainly do. But Kilian Intoxicated, very similar. It has this very nice coffee vibe that's quite prominent. A little bit of a spicy kind of feel to it. A lot of people actually talk about this one as like smelling a little bit like a Turkish coffee or something like that. And of course it has a little bit of that sort of chocolatey patchouli vibe too, to give it an overall dark but very nice feel to it. So I did really enjoy that one. The performance is definitely much better, like I said, than the newer Amen batches. You do of course get the cool bottles, and like I said, if you don't like that tarry note in Amen, you should definitely consider Intoxicated, because I do think it's a really nice fragrance. And I think it's one of the more perhaps mass appealing fragrances by Kilian. Now next on the list, number 4. This is a Galleria Parfums, and this is Cognac Cafe. So some people talked about, I think it was Intense Cafe as having a similar vibe. And I know I've mentioned there's a similarity between this and Black Phantom, although I do find it smells quite a bit different. I think it's just a similar style of fragrance, because it doesn't really smell that similar, especially the more time you get with it. But especially on the opening, it has this very airy kind of a coffee vibe, and this has like a steamed coffee note or something to that effect. And you do get this kind of wispy, willow, almost cloudy kind of a coffee feeling, where it is fairly prominent. It's quite strong, but it does have something in it that makes it feel very smooth and not super thick, which does give off the impression of maybe perhaps a steamed feel. Now there is a little bit of sweetness here too, so it does open up nice and sweet, and I find this one has a very nice overall sweet fluffy vibe to it. I do get a little bit of almond in this too, I believe. It's not very boozy. So I know this one is Cognac Cafe, and it does have coffee and cognac. I don't get tons of booziness. Maybe just a little hint here and there, but it is to me much more dominated by coffee. If you really like coffee, actually this is a really good one. And with the comparison to Black Phantom, the coffee is much stronger in this one. I actually find it a much different kind of a sweetness, although they are both fairly sweet fragrances. Again, this one, not a ton of not a ton of cognac, but a ton of coffee. Do really enjoy this one. Actually looking forward to wearing this one a little bit more in the fall and winter. Time is definitely getting right for this one. Can't wait for the weather to start cooling down. And of course, I can wear a lot more of those thicker fragrances that I like. The next one, Strangest Perfumery Roasted Coffee. A lot of words. It's a big, long title. I'm just calling this one Roasted Coffee from now on. This is probably the only one on the list that isn't super coffee heavy, in my opinion. A lot of people do smell a lot of coffee with this fragrance. It's one reason I put it on the list. For a lot of people, this is a fairly coffee dominant fragrance. I definitely pick up a nice coffee accord, but it's more in the mid of the actual notes. Like it feels like it's underneath other things. I do find this to be a very nice boozy fragrance. It also has nice notes of tobacco, which has a little bit of a feel of sort of a sweet hay. And like I said, underneath that, it does have this coffee feel, especially in the opening. I definitely get that feeling from this one. Now, like I said, this is a very, very nice fragrance. Complex, has a lot of character to it, and if you're looking for something that is definitely a boozy coffee fragrance, I recommend this one. And I was quite impressed with this one. I took a long time off reviewing and did review this fragrance, was really happy with it, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. So that's number 3 spot is Roasted Coffee and a lot of other words by Strangest Perfumery. Now, moving into the top 2, and I think probably a lot of people know what the top 2 are going to be, but what is the ranking? That's a really good question. I've had a lot of time to think about this and to sort of compare them, and I want to do a comparison of these 2 fragrances coming up, just to really talk about them in depth. But without any further ado, number 2 spot is Follow by Kerosene. So a lot of people do herald this as the best coffee fragrance, and it's definitely in contention for sure. I probably could have put this on the top of the list without any real problem. It is a really well done, well performing coffee forward fragrance. Opens up very dark. Reminds me a little bit of like a dark roasted coffee, maybe a little bit of a fresh coffee bean kind of a feel, but definitely much darker. And as it goes along, a lot of the sweetness starts to sift into this fragrance, and it turns into a little bit more of a nice mocha feel. You do get a little bit of that darkness, but the sweetness really brightens it up, gives it a little bit of a creamy feel as well, and so it does feel more like a fluffy mocha in the dry down. Performance on this one is quite good, especially for a coffee dominant fragrance. It is in that 6 to 8 hours. I find most coffee fragrances, the coffee note doesn't last more than a few hours. This one is coffee through and through. It is coffee from the beginning to the end, and it is really nicely done. So I do like that one a lot. And like I said, it could easily have been the number 1 spot. But the number 1 spot, perhaps a little bit of recency bias, if you want to call it that, as it is one that I've tried a little bit more recently. But it is also one that a lot of people like, and a lot of people actually will agree with me that this one is better than Follow, and that is Awake by Acro. So Acro is actually a really nice fragrance house. I believe the perfumer is Olivier Cresp. He does have a lot of fragrances that I really enjoy. And it is a little bit of a fragrance house that doesn't get talked about a lot, but there's a lot of really goodies in there, and Awake is definitely one of them. And if you want coffee, if you're looking for a very straightforward coffee fragrance, absolutely check this one out. Now, one of the big things I get with this is that it does have a little bit more of this Colombian coffee kind of vibe. Almost like a nice, slightly spiced coffee. Not actually something with a lot of spice in it, but there is something in there that almost feels like a light spice in the fragrance, in that coffee, that makes it smell like a really nice, rich Colombian coffee. I almost feel like it's, especially in the opening, that is the only note in the fragrance, and who knows, maybe it actually is. Now this one, like Follow, does start to sweeten up. I find this is very common for coffee fragrances, and that's fine. It does start to sweeten up, but it doesn't fully go off into that full-on mocha kind of territory that Follow does go into. So while it does sort of have a similar kind of scent profile, it is, I think, from the start all the way to the end, a very distinct, very different kind of a fragrance, and I do really enjoy that one. Performance on this one also very good in that 6 to 8 hour range, and again, for a coffee fragrance, for a coffee dominant fragrance, I think that's actually pretty good. Most coffee notes, like I said, just do not last. So anyways, those are the fragrances. Now, there's other fragrances I actually was going to mention as honorable mentions, things like Golden Dala and a lot of the coffee fragrances from Xerjoff that for me just don't have the longevity with respect to the coffee note that I really want from a coffee fragrance. They are nonetheless nice fragrances, so also those to check out. But like I said, that top 5, you're looking for a coffee dominant fragrance, check those out. But leave a comment down below, guys. What is your favorite coffee fragrance? Let me know. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.